So we're going to discuss today audio, mainly focusing on audio testing, not too much voice. I'll talk to that in just a minute. More of audio testing on Android devices. My name is Shannon Lee. I'm the lead solutions for Kobiton. We do have a booth open downstairs, so if you all are interested in talking to us a bit further around these capabilities, please feel free to do just that, and happy to extend the discussion around how to audio test on Android devices. Okay? All right, I'm gonna do a quick audience check really fast. So who here are developers or developing an application? Okay, so good, which makes sense here at DroidCon, majority of you all. I am curious though, are there any testers or QA engineers here in the audience as well who are testing applications? No, surprise, surprise. Is there anyone doing both? So maybe you're majority of the development, but doing a little bit of testing on top of it? Absolutely. For those, I am curious if you raise your hand, what kind of, I'm going to say environment, what vertical are you all in when it comes to your application needing audio? Are you all in gaming or entertainment or streaming services, or anyone with a focus on accessibility testing by chance? Anyone can just like throw it out there. Like, how does your device have, or your application have audio? Gaming. Nice. Yeah. What game do you all develop? Cool. Okay. Awesome. Nice. Anyone else? Search bar. What does search bar do? It's a search bar embedded in our application, in our main app, but we do want to add a voice to text. Yeah. Scenario. Yeah, absolutely. For anyone else? No? Okay. Just wanted to kind of get a quick gauge with you all. Oh. And then there's my last part. And then asking what industry you're in. I am curious, is anyone doing any accessibility testing or focus on accessibility with, say, Android TalkBack or anything of that nature? Is anyone gearing up for accessibility testing, since it is a very important part of development? Awesome, makes sense, yep. Okay, so the challenge of testing audio, this is gonna be from a remote perspective. So of course it's easy to connect your Android devices locally, right into your own computer. You have the device in hand. You'll be able to listen and hear back the audio that's output. With that though, it can be very difficult to also support that use case from a remote perspective. So most device lab providers, they actually don't support audio output, so you're kind of going into a session or going in, making use of the devices without any audio output. When you use emulators, say with an Android Studio, they can be very, well, them in themselves can be very flaky just to start off with it, but then also that sound in itself can be inconsistent and buggy as well. So a lot of times the only option, as I just mentioned, for developers and testers is to locally test, but of course that will limit your device coverage. If you only have one or two Android devices on hand, then you're siloed to one or two of those devices and those OS versions as well. So you're unable to have that device coverage when you want to test against additional devices or additional OS versions. A lot of times teams will also kind of hand off devices or physical devices to teammates. That in itself can be very cumbersome when you have a ton of floating physical devices, keeping track of them, procuring them. Sometimes you don't get the devices back if that individual were to leave or anything of that note. So from physical devices are just hard to manage. And then on top of that, hard to also limit your device coverage. And with that, limits your scalability, which just adds more work to your workload. So as I mentioned, double efforts in performing those functional test cases, as well as those non-functional test cases, such as accessibility. Okay. So one thing I want to make note is that for developers and testers, kind of what would be the best route to go when you're wanting to test audio or develop audio on your application. So the best way to go to approach this is to research and select tooling that supports your use cases. So a tool that supports your audio output, and then for those that are looking into accessibility, to also support Android TalkBack. And then also a tooling that supports the ability to connect to devices in your own IDE. So a lot of times as you're developing the audio output, a lot of that syntax and code needs to be developed within your application, then of course, thereafter tested against as well. And then we are going to touch on accessibility testing within this demonstration also when it comes to content labeling, Android TalkBack, and more of an accessibility type analysis. Okay. So I have a slew of demo videos I'd like to share with you all today. I do apologize that the internet hasn't been the best to actually do any live demos. So here I'm going to go ahead and just do some existing video demonstrations that we have. So let's say if I'm a developer and I want to go ahead and develop my application to allow audio output, maybe if you're doing any microphone or audio input or anything of that nature, you want to be able to connect to the devices right from your own IDE. Once again, physical devices are fantastic, but you're very limited in that device coverage. So here within sourcing or tool sourcing, selecting a tool that has the ability to once again connect to devices even from a remote standpoint. And for that, I'm going to showcase our capability called virtual USB. Not so much audio related, but just wanted to showcase the ability to connect to a real device, even from Android Studio, so that you can begin any of your development around audio input, output, microphone input, output, etc. So here in this demonstration, we have our virtual USB application pulled up. I'm going to go ahead and connect to this Galaxy S10 device that it's currently being housed within Kobiton's data center. So it is from a remote perspective. It is a real device, but it's not physically or locally on hand. But what we'll do is with virtual USB is we're going to go ahead and make that connection as if it is locally connected to your local machine. So with that, we'll go ahead and launch the Galaxy S10 in the portal just to give us a live view of the interactions we're going to be applying to the device. With that, pulling up Android Studio. As I navigate to Device Manager, we can see that the Galaxy S10 is actually registered as a physical device that I can now connect to in Android Studio. With that connection, I'm going to go and launch my application onto that device. All this is happening in real time, even from a demo video standpoint. So here we have the application launched on the device. I can make interactions with this application, so really being able to be a drop-in replacement for emulators, as emulators only really capture 2/3 of, say, your development, your testing. I can see here in the application that when I'm hitting reset, it's actually not resetting the count. So what I'll do now is I'm going to actually find the logic within my application pertaining to that scenario, and I can actually add a breakpoint within my code. And from that, I can relaunch my application in debug mode. So now as I interact with the application, once I hit that breakpoint, here when we hit reset, it will go ahead and invoke Android Studio's debugging capabilities. So here I can see here. So this is fantastic when it comes to wanting to develop or instrument your application, making use of any audio input or output or microphone input and output. If you launch the device and you're finding that the audio input-output is not working as expected, even before you have compiled your application, you can you can connect to real devices from a remote standpoint to do any debugging when it comes to those scenarios of functional testing, non-functional testing, including audio, such as audio in-out and mic in-out. Yeah. So that is one way that we can support maybe we're not having the audio itself coming through, but from a code level development perspective, having the ability to connect to real devices, even from a remote standpoint, as if it's locally connected to your local machine, really expands that device coverage. So now within, like say in your private cloud, you have 10, 20, a good bit of devices versus the 1 or 2 you might locally have on hand. So once again, really expanding that device coverage for your development efforts, even when it comes to audio support. The next demonstration I will show to you all is more from a QA perspective, but also from a developer with your compiled application. So maybe we've already went ahead and instrumented our application for audio input, output, microphone input, output, but now you're ready to actually go on and apply it to another device and honestly get you the confirmation that what you developed is working as expected prior to releasing it to QA. Or also in the QA efforts, being able to load your application on a device with what we call a manual session. So here, demonstrating for you all, this is a manual session on the Kobiton portal. I have launched a Galaxy device here that's running Android 10. A lot of times, device labs don't offer audio support. So here in the manual session, if I just went ahead and developed and compiled my application with audio input, output, etc., now I want to also verify it from a more manual perspective outside my IDE. I can do just that, launching a Kobiton device.
Let's face it, delivering perfect mobile experiences is hard.
So fantastic
whether
for
you're lacking shared
gaming
access to real
applications
devices
or
hosted
for
locally,
text to input to ensure that you can
defects
audio
with
inject
incomplete testing,
anything for
or keeping
your
releases
application
behind by
functionality
constantly fixing
and be able to hear it back,
scripts.
essentially.
Releasing mobile applications at both
And then also great for
high-quality
streaming
and rapid
applications.
speed
So any
might
applications
seem
that are streaming live video or video in general, once again, gaming applications, that way you have the ability to functionally ensure that your application is working as expected, whichever hat you might be wearing, if it's a developer hat or QA hat, that you can do, even from a remote perspective, that a lot of device labs don't offer that support. It can be a bit difficult also with Android and ADB, as they do have API endpoints that allow you to string up support for remote devices, but that in itself is a lot of effort to do and can be very cumbersome in that, just to be able to have audio support from a remote perspective. So even further, I'm now going to enter into the realms of more non-functional testing, so really wanting to touch on the accessibility capabilities, such as Android TalkBack is a very, very prominent accessibility tool that ensuring that your application is accessible by all users, even those with any visual impairments. So they need to make use of Android TalkBack to actually see, or I'm sorry, to actually hear what element they're interacting with. So we have a couple ways to go about that. So one, of course, is actually launching into a manual session, enabling Android TalkBack. Let me actually just jump here.
Button. To activate accessibility samples. Current
so
element.
This is Android TalkBack as an example.
Hello button. Double tap to activate.
There are
Android
some examples here as we go farther down.
Button. Double tap to activate. This is a button. Button.
So I'm going to use this hi button as an example. So a lot of times when we're developing applications, we might not have the insight into what the label or what the content label might be for that element. A lot of times we might hear, such as in this hi element, that you'll hear this is a button, which of course would be incorrect. So I'm going to play that one more time just so you can all can hear.
Activate label. This is a button.
So as an end user, if I heard that, it would be a bit confusing to me to understand, okay, is this an element? Is this a button? Why does it say button twice? Am I navigating over two other buttons? What's going on? So we have our accessibility analysis to help capture any incorrect labeling when it comes to Android TalkBack. Oh, let me go back here. So this is a quick example of our accessibility analysis that we provide within what we call our Session Explorer. I'm going to back up to this. So here we have the hi button that we just heard that it was, the hi. This is a button, where our content labeling. So let's say you're wanting to not even enable Android TalkBack. You want to just go straight to non-functional testing without having to hear any audio, or maybe you have the type of plan that won't support audio, but you still want to ensure that your labels are correct. We have our AI to come in and analyze your test case, your functional test case that we can now pair with non-functional testing and ensure that those content labels are correct. So here over that hi button, we're seeing that the speakable text, the content description is this is a button, speakable text is this is a button, but then we also showcase that redundant text that says button, showcasing that what we heard was this is a button, button that, of course, is incorrect. So as a developer, we can go in, see this, come back into Android Studio, connect to that device, modify that content label, and then go ahead and compile and repackage the APK to ensure that the APK is, with those labels, those individuals using Android TalkBack, they're going to be hearing the correct labeling. So a big takeaway with this one, once again, is that you don't have to necessarily even have the audio to hear it. We have our content labeling that can catch that without even having to hear the audio itself. Of course, wouldn't hurt to have a double checker to go ahead and launch the manual into a manual session and also hear the correct labeling or incorrect labeling on top of it. Okay, so that is a good bit for what I had for you all today. One of the testing, I did have a test, I had a voice testing demo for you all, but unfortunately that wasn't ready just in time for this, for DroidCon, but within the roadmap of Kobiton specifically, but of course offered to a lot of device lab providers, is that they'll have, kind of similar to image injection, they'll actually have audio injection on top of that. So with audio injection, instead of actually using the microphone, which can be difficult from a remote standpoint, you can actually inject the audio to simulate the microphone or simulate a phone call or something of that nature, so that you can also test the microphone input-output or voice testing for your efforts for development and QA as well. Okay, did anyone have any questions by chance?